So guys, as we wrap up Lab 4 on conservation of mass between reactants and products, I wanted to give you an example of a bar graph because most of you have elected to create a bar graph, but I want to show you how to do that within Google Sheets. So in order to create a bar graph, let's generate a data table that may be similar to something you generated during the lab. So we did 4 reactions. We'll just call them reactions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And hopefully you measured the mass of the reactants, probably in grams. So let's go ahead and throw a unit in there, like true science people. And then when the reaction had occurred and you observed those signs of chemical change, you probably measured the mass of the products of that reaction, the new substances that were formed. And let's put our unit grams in there as well. And let's just make up some numbers. Say for the reaction between baking soda and vinegar, we started with 50.98 grams, and we ended with, I don't know, 52.13 grams. And then for magnesium and hydrochloric acid, let's say we started with 26.40 grams, and we ended with 26.08 grams. For our 2 solution reactions, aluminum nitrate and copper nitrate with sodium hydroxide, let's vary the numbers up. Let's say we started out with 30.94 grams, and let's say it increased somehow to 35.67 grams for the mass of the products. And we'll go the other way. Let's say we started with 40.75 grams of reactants for the copper nitrate solution, and we ended with, I don't know, something much smaller, 25.67 grams for the products. Now, I just made those numbers up. If you have a data table that looks something like this, that simply lists the reactions, lists the mass of the reactants and your ending masses, the masses of the products, making the graph is really simple. If you highlight all of your data and go to the Insert menu and insert a chart, Google Sheets is really good about selecting a graph that will represent your data well. So let's take a look at what it has to offer us. In this case, if we insert a chart, it chooses a bar graph where the mass of the reactants is represented in blue and the mass of the products is represented in red. It's got your axis labeled here, reactions, and it's got a key for each of those graphs. Now, we could elect, if we take a look over here, we could elect to change some things. We could change the type of the chart. We could do something like a line graph, but that doesn't necessarily represent it better, and the reactions are not a continuous variable. We could do a scatter plot, but I like the first graph that Google selected for me. We'll stick to the bar chart because it visually represents the data that I collected well. You are going to need to customize your chart. For example, that's not really an appropriate title for the graph. Mass of reactants and products isn't bad, but we can take the unit out of there because it's listed in the key. Mass of reactants and products during a chemical change, maybe. During, during a chemical change. And it'll automatically update that. I don't like that it's off to the left there. That looks really awkward. So you can do things like you can change the title from left justified to centered. We could do the same for the key. We could, under the series and legend tab, we could change things like what the axis numbers are, for example. If we wanted to format data points, we could do that. So the best way to learn how these settings are going to interact with your graph is to click on them. Like if we want data labels, I just added the actual numerical values in grams that are in my data table. Now, if you do change your data, for example, instead of writing reaction 1, I could write sodium bicarbonate and acetic acid. And instead of listing it as reaction 1, it would actually give you your reactants For example, we could change 2 to magnesium and hydrochloric acid. And it updates automatically from the table to your graph. So creating a graph is actually a lot simpler and more professional in Google Sheets than it will ever be when you create these things by hand and take a lot of time to work on your axes. A lot of the preset selections that Google makes for you actually tend to represent your data really well. So I hope this was helpful to you. Feel free to watch it as many times as you need to as you represent your data in your formal paper.